You and I are having this conversation, and people aren't making a run on Wall Street. People are still paying their mortgages and going to PTA meetings. And
after the 2017 New York Times report, which was probably one of the biggest moments in UFO disclosure, because it was in the New York Times, and then you see something like that in the New York, especially the New York Times in 2017. People really respected it. It's like this is a real story.
Well, and this is apolitical.
Yes.
I mean, how many topics can you go to Congress and have that's not polarizing? Right. This is one of the only ones where you can literally have Congressman Burchett and Congresswoman AOC side by side agreeing that this is important.
Right.
It's a very rare opportunity. And so, my concern, I'm doing this because I believe it's the right thing to do. And my concern is that we're at a point now where I've said before, secrets aren't like a fine wine where the longer you keep a cork on it, the better it gets. I think secrets are perishable. I think they have a shelf life. I think they're like vegetables in your refrigerator. And there comes a point where if you leave them there too long, they start to rot and they start to stink, and it becomes a big mess to clean up, right? And so that's my perspective. And what I'm trying to do is give the government an ability to work its way out of a corner that it's put itself into for the last several decades, and with no seeming way out, right?
Right.
They look around like, well, how do we get ourselves out of this trip?
Is there an issue of legality, like of spending and like
100%?
There's people that would be liable for not being straightforward with Congress.
And I know people want their pound of flesh. I know there's people out there, we've been lied to for decades, and
and then they make it a political issue, and they go after someone for And
I think that's the wrong approach. I think there was a time where we needed to keep this secret, and I think what you do is you give those guys awards, give those guys and gals awards who did it. Don't make them enemies, make them friends, and say, okay, look, but those were different times. Now is the time to come clean. Talk to the members of Congress.
Forgive all the past sins.
Yeah,
make
truth
them
and reconciliation.
Immune to prosecution.
100%.
And let's just get clear with all this and understand that it was all in good faith that you did it in the first place.
100%. Now,
all in the interest of the United States security.
You talk about legal issues. The problem is there are, though, real legal issues. So let's say you have, again, these cups, forgive my analogies. You have two aerospace companies, Company A, Company B. And let's say I am in the Department of Defense back in the 50s, 60s, and I come across this interesting technology. I have no idea what the hell it is. It just came out of the sky. And I go to Company A and I said, tell me what you can figure out about that, right? 10 years later, Company A becomes a multi-billion-dollar aerospace company. Company B goes bankrupt, 200 people lose their jobs, and now people who have stock, investors in that company, lose their money, right? Unfair advantage. Keep in mind, you're supposed to have fair competition in the U.S. government. So if you give an unfair advantage to Company A to B, you're talking a serious liability. There's SEC violations there. There's all sorts of concerns one has to pay attention to because someone somewhere gave an unfair advantage to one company over another. So there are legal liabilities that we have to recognize. It's not just clear cut. Okay, forgive and forget. There's going to have to be some additional protection and understanding for if that occurred, we need to figure out how we deal with that as well.
So that would be an impediment to release. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, these are big companies, right, with really deep pockets and a lot of lawyers.
Well, also, this is a discussion that we've had on here before. If you did find something, who would you bring it to? Well, you bring it to the people that build your fucking jets. Like, hey, guys, what the hell is this? Like, you make some sort of a top secret agreement. You bring it to them in some sort of undisclosed facility.
Best and brightest.
Secured.
Best and brightest.
Bring the guys in and go, what the fuck is this thing?
Yep.
Yeah, you kind of have to. Otherwise, like, what else would you do? I mean, how else do you find out how these things work? And if you were going to do it in a secretive manner, you would have to bring it to defense contractors because those are the only people that are capable of making things. They make your jets. They make the every stealth bomber, whatever the fuck it is. They make all that shit.
Going back to a colleague of mine made the comparison. He said, "Look, Lou, imagine being during the days of Da Vinci, and all of a sudden bringing Da Vinci a garage door opener. You have no idea what it's used for.
Right.
You've never seen plastic before, and you don't even understand electromagnetic radiation, right? And infrared. Where do you start on the analysis and exploitation of a technology that the physics hasn't even been discovered yet, right?
I mean, garage door openers seem like magic.
Right.
It really does. You know,
Yeah, I press a button and a door opens like magic. Wait, where's the horse? Where's the strings? Where's
exactly.
that? Right.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of bananas. You press a button on your car, and all of a sudden your door opens.
right.
And you drive in, and you press another button, and it closes. And it's all done through the air.
Right.
Which is bananas.
Magic.
But we're just
right?
accustomed to it.
That's right.
Yeah. So this kind of technology, I'm sure you're aware of the Bob Lazar story.
I'm aware. I don't know Bob. I've never met him.
You
So
never got into that?
I did not.
How could you not with your line of work?
Because, I always wanted to be insulated from prejudicing the jury. And I know it
Okay.
sounds kind of strange, but
No,
I didn't
it
ever.
makes sense.
It's kind of something I impose on myself because I didn't want to have any preconceived notions of going in. Most people kind of, I suspect, would be tempted to say, well, I'm going to learn everything I can about, UFO lore. I wanted the opposite.
You're a better man than me.
I don't know if I'm
Be
better.
fucking chasing that shit down.
I think I just wanted to be very, very careful to preserve the investigative integrity, right? And we're all humans. We're all biased. There's no way around it. We all have some degree of bias. Let's be honest and truthful here. It doesn't matter what type of bias it is. We all have some sort of bias somewhere, whether it's food or it's the people you like to date or whatever. I wanted to avoid that as much as possible. And so I always kept it very, very focused on the here and now. And, what can we see today?
Right. You're aware of the story, though, right? The basic...
Tangentially, that he worked at a particular facility, and at that facility he was exposed to some sort of UAP technology.
That thing.
Right, that thing.
That thing right there, the sport model. And that he was brought in as a propulsions expert and to try to... They didn't know how it exactly worked, but they sort of just said, tell me what this is.
Roger.
And then along the way, he realized, oh, this isn't even ours.
Yeah, I'm aware of again the overarching story. I don't know any of the details, and I've never met him personally, so I'm
He's a very, very interesting guy. I had dinner with him with my friend Andrew Schultz and Jeremy Corbell. We went to dinner, and informally talked and had a fascinating conversation. And
Jeremy's a great guy.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, he's really he's done a lot.
He said to say hi.
Hi.
He's pumped that we're talking.
Yeah, he's done a lot.
He's
for
a
this cause.
UFO nut, and he got me really way back in with his documentary, Bob Lazar, Flying Saucers, wherever the actual title of it is. But that documentary is fantastic, and it's essentially going over Bob Lazar's story from the 1980s to today, which he's told the exact same story, which is nuts that you have one giant lie your whole life. Like, come on. There's a lot of weirdness to the story, obviously, like there is with everything. There's a lot of people that want to discredit his background and all sorts of other things. But the reality of what he's saying is essentially what we're seeing in these crafts, which is very strange. So he described how these things worked and how they moved and how they would turn sideways and sort of like project this, whatever this reactor that they have inside of them. And he talked about this element 115. They have a stable version of it that was essentially just theoretical at the time in 1980. No one really knew whether or not that thing actually even exists, 89 or whatever it was. And that they would douse this thing, project radiation upon it, and it would create this warp, this gravity warp, this thing that allowed this craft to move in ways that defied our understanding of propulsion systems.
That's a hell of a lucky guess.
Hell of a lucky guess. Hell of a lucky guess in 1989.
Wow.
And he drew it. He has diagrams of what this thing looked like and how it worked. And it essentially looked exactly like that little model that's on the desk there. And that he felt like the whole it didn't make any sense. He said the whole thing, it didn't have any seams, which now we understand 3D printing, right? So now we know that we can actually,
but only now,
right.
not back then, right?
Of course.
Everything had rivets.
Exactly.
The skin of a craft was the skin of an aircraft. And
Exactly.
it had rivets and had nuts and bolts and
exactly. But now, obviously now we have carbon fiber. We have a bunch of different ways of constructing things. But back then, he didn't know what the fuck that thing was. He said it looked like it had all been melted, like into place, like that it had been like almost like smooth, like wax, like melted wax. And that it had no instrumentation inside of it, and it was designed for very small things, like something that was like 3 feet tall. And that all these things seemed to operate through the being itself, had some sort of connection to the craft, some sort of strange way of interfacing with the craft that didn't have anything to do with pulling levers and moving
Sure.
things.
But Joe, is that really that much of a stretch? Let's look at this. We've done experiments where we've had pilots be able to control aircraft thousands of miles away with a helmet that interprets thought.
Right.
Right. So it's again.
How does the helmet is it similar to like a Neuralink setup? Have you seen the new video of the second Neuralink patient?
I have not.
There's video of him playing Counter-Strike. Is it Counter-Strike or is that it? So Counter-Strike, which is a very popular online 3D game, and this guy who does not have use of his body has this Neuralink implant. He's the second Neuralink patient. And apparently, with each iteration, it gets more and more sophisticated and better. So this is from this person's point of view, he's playing this video game entirely with his mind. So
Playing
he's
better than I can with my with my
better
hands.
than anybody can because the first Neuralink patient we had him on, and he said essentially it's like having an aimbot because you don't miss. You look at the thing you're trying to shoot at, and instantaneously your crosshairs go there.
Wow.
Yeah, so all this stuff is taking place entirely. This is all him doing this entirely with his mind.
But is that right? So if we can do that now,
right,
is it really that far of a
It's
stretch
not.
to think that, someone who's a little more advanced than us, right, our friends from out of town, realize that's the way to do it. That's more efficient, right? The speed of the processing of the brain, the processes of the brain, is much faster. It takes us longer to then have to mechanically use our hands and manipulate and do things. This is almost, not quite, but almost instantaneous. You don't have that lag, right?
Right, of course.
And so that would certainly make sense. Modern warfare, not the game, but actual modern warfare, is beginning to turn to that. And we're using AI and all these other augmentation to enhance performance. And so I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
No, certainly not. I mean, just go from garage door openers to, 500, 600 years ago to today, and then cell phones, the ability to send video across the world instantaneously. All the sophisticated stuff that we just completely take for granted because it's become a normal part of our everyday life.
That's I used to give a briefing to some folks. I'm so glad you mentioned this because this goes back to the whole stigma and taboo issue. I used to have a slideshow, and I still have it somewhere, and I would discuss the Latin word prefix of para, P-A-R-A, and it means above or beside. And so what I would do is I'd say the word parachute, and I'd ask people, what do you think of when you hear the word parachute? And people would describe obviously something that deploys over your head and hopefully you hit the ground with a thump and not a thud, right? But something that's normal, we use every day. And then I say, what about the word paramedic? And then people would look at it and say, well, I think of a first responder, someone good, some sort of medical lifesaver that's going to be there for your benefit. And then when I say the word paranormal, what do you think? And people will stop for a second. Maybe they kind of give you a little sly smile and they'll say, what do you mean? I said, what do you mean? I mean that, paranormal. The only reason why you're reacting the way you are is because you've been conditioned that the word paranormal is kooky stuff. When in reality, in science, by definition, everything is paranormal until it becomes normal. The cell phone that I use every day 50 years ago, absolutely paranormal. And so I would go through this exercise of things that were once considered paranormal. For example, when the Inca first saw the Spaniards, the conquistadores coming from the reconquering, they saw them on the shores of the beach, and they saw these humans in armor riding on a horse. And they assumed, because they'd never seen a horse before, they assumed it was a single entity, it was a single monster. And that for them was paranormal. They didn't understand it was actually a human riding on a horse with, metal skin. Same thing with acupuncture. I remember a time when I was growing up as a kid, people thought Eastern medicine, acupuncture was nonsense. Well, now at the Veterans Administration, the VA, for some of my guys in combat, they actually prescribe acupuncture as therapy. It's not paranormal, right? And so there's all these examples in history where we think something is kooky and weird when in reality it's not. It's just we don't understand it yet, and we have done such a good job of stigmatizing this conversation that the moment you even say the word paranormal or you say the word UFO or anything like that, people are conditioned without even thinking about it. It's reflexive to react a certain way. And we have to first deprogram ourselves first a little bit before we can start moving forward. Okay, how do we destigmatize this conversation? Well, first of all, what's kooky? What do you think is kooky about something that's in our airspace that's performing in ways that we can't replicate. That people say, well, wait a minute. We spend millions, if not billions of dollars putting a probe on Mars to try to find microbial life. And by the way, it looks like that may happen. It looks like there actually may be some evidence to suggest that. We spend lots of money trying to find technosignatures of intelligent life, radio signatures in our own Milky Way, right? Well, is it possible within the 4.5 billion years our planet's been here that maybe intelligent life maybe found us first? Is it possible? Could be. We have to stop putting these limitations. Joe, when I was in the medical program, when I was learning to be microbiology and immunology in college, we learned from our professor that Homo sapiens sapien as a modern species has been around roughly between 100,000 to 200,000 years. Now, I'm not an expert, but that's what they say. It was only the Greeks 2,000 years ago that introduced the idea that there's only two types of life forms on this planet. And you are either A, a plant, or B, you're an animal. And it wasn't the last 300 years. So if you look at a 24-hour clock, roughly the last 5 minutes in the 24 hours towards midnight, we discovered another form of life that is neither plant nor animal that's been here with us on this planet, and that is the world of fungus. During the Renaissance and the days of Newton, we discovered that there was this other life form we've been sharing all along. And so we pat ourselves on the shoulder, and it wasn't the last 120 years. Think about it. The last 10 seconds of our existence on this planet, so to speak, in a 24-hour clock as a modern species, we actually discovered the true dominant life form on this planet. And in fact, if you take all the biomass of every plant and the biomass of every animal and the biomass of every fungus and add it all up together, it still will not equal the biomass of this hidden kingdom of life that's actually the dominant life form on this planet. And that wasn't until we were able to curve glass and look through a little steel tube and famously shout, little beasties, did we discover the world of microorganisms that, yes, live inside of you, and yes, live on the skin of the ISS space station, and yes, live miles underneath the Arctic ice, right? That is the true dominant life form on this planet, and it always has been. And it wasn't until the last 120 years we discovered that. So is it possible that there's something else that is just as normal to this world? Is it possible? Well, the answer is a resounding yes, of course it's possible, because we're always discovering new ways life can exist. When I was growing up as a kid, I was told, absolutely, as a matter of fact, all life form is derived from photosynthesis, ultimately, when you go all the way down. It turns out that's not true. It wasn't until we discovered in the deepest depths of our oceans, or these things called black smokers, we discovered there are creatures that thrive with no light, and they thrive off of something called chemosynthesis, a completely different way to metabolize energy to sustain life, right? So every time we put Mother Nature in a little box, she always finds a way to wiggle her way out. And I think that's important when having this conversation, because if there's one thing we know as human beings, we're usually wrong at first.
Well, we exist, and we do send things to other planets, and we do send things into space. It only makes sense that something far more intelligent than us that would be doing that, and if they did, they'd probably watch an emerging civilization, which is essentially what we are, right? In like you said, 200,000 years, which is nothing, the existence of Homo sapiens. They've gone from things that use stones and flint map to things that can fly things through the air. I mean, if you look at Orville Wright and Wilbur Wright when they flew the first airplane, you go from that to the Apollo 11 launch. That's only like, 50 years?
That's right.
Something crazy like that?
That's right.
That's nuts, right? And you just take that and everything moves exponentially. You take that and you would imagine a civilization that's been around 10,000 years longer than us, 100,000 years longer, 1,000,000 years longer than us. Something that doesn't exist.
How about 100 years? We have evolved more in the last 150 years than we have in the last 150,000 years.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, so, and then you have the other. For me, I find when people say, "Well, the space is so huge," and is it possible that things are coming from outer space? My response has always been the same. Look, I don't know where they're from. I just know that they're here. And could they be from outer space? Sure. They can be from inner space or even the space in between. And I say that because the universe is far more complex than we give it credit for. Every time, there was a time we had Newtonian physics, and we thought that was a solution. Then all of a sudden Einstein comes along, and we realize that, wait, space and time are actually connected, and then everything's relative. And all of a sudden now you have quantum mechanics, which is, this spooky action at a distance, right? Where the whole universe is behaving in a way that it shouldn't, and yet that looks like the real way the universe works. Right? Mm-hmm. I often tell people we are, as humans, we have only five fundamental senses that we can base our reality upon. And if you can't touch it, taste it, hear it, smell it, etc., we can't interact with it. And so where I live in Wyoming, we have these beautiful night skies, kind of like you have here in your studio here, 300 days of unoccluded night skies. And as beautiful as those night skies are, if you were to look at that same portion of the night sky through a radio telescope, you would see a whole different reality around you. You'd see nebula, and you'd see things in different spectra that we can't pick up. You pick an ultraviolet and infrared, so you would see a whole different reality. Just like our cell phones, right? If you could see in cell phone vision and see in Wi-Fi and 5G and GPS, you would interact with your environment completely different because you would see reality. So we can only interact with a very small sliver of the reality that we can perceive because we're humans. But most of reality is actually beyond that. And then, of course, you have scalability issues. The universe is immensely huge. And what scientists are now saying, if you look in any direction, you can see roughly within the visible, let me emphasize, visible horizon of our universe is about 13.9 billion light years, plus or minus. So that means in any direction I can see 13.9 billion light years with the right equipment. What's a light year? Well, it's as fast as light can travel in a year. Well, light travels pretty fast. In fact, it travels at 186,000 miles per second. So 7.5 times around our planet in 1 second. So imagine how far you can go in a year. Now multiply that by 13.9 billion. And that, by scientists' estimation, so that if the universe end to end of our visible, we're stuck in the middle, is roughly 27 billion light years, scientists are now saying that's possibly only 10% of the known universe, because the universe is so big and so vast and so far, light will never have time to reach Earth. So that's at a minimum 100 billion light years, right? And so we are this little speck in the middle. And as crazy as that is to even try to conceive, if you compare one atom inside one hydrogen atom, Avogadro's number, right? 1 times 10 to the negative umpteen, all the way down, it is roughly the same level of scale as we are to the universe, meaning that atom is the size of a human as we are the size of the universe, as we are a human to the size of the universe. So there is this, and we as humans can only interact plus or minus with 1 order of magnitude up or down. Otherwise, the universe is simply too big or too small, meaning most of the universe and reality lies in those scales. We live in this little tiny, tiny sliver. And so...
You hurt my head. But yeah, we live in a tiny sliver. Yeah. And the idea that we're alone, I think, is preposterous. I really do. And I know people, they constantly chime in with this. Well, where's the evidence? If Elon's famously said, if the aliens are real, they're very subtle. I don't know why he says that, though. I think he probably says that because he doesn't want to sound like a kook while he's working with NASA and SpaceX. I'd probably say some stuff like that too. Well,
let me ask you this: as human beings, right? The Serengeti in a helicopter, right? And let's say we want to monitor the health of a particular, herd of elephants, right? And so what happens? Or wildebeest, we fly over, we pick one, we shoot it with a tranquilizer, it falls asleep, we go down, we do some tests, pull its blood. Now think about it from the perspective of the wildebeest, right? It wakes up, kind of meanders over to the watering hole and says, Bill, you're not going to believe this, man, but something out of the sky came down, and all of a sudden they were touching me, and, I woke up and my butt hurts, right? What the hell was that? Right. To this day, even in China, when we go into a zoo, right, and we have the panda bear exhibits, what do? So we don't disrupt the pandas, we wear panda suits. Now, it sounds silly, but you can actually get online and see zookeepers wearing panda suits because they don't want to they want to interfere as least as possible with the natural flora and fauna there inside the exhibit,
Do you think
plants and animals.
Was it reasonable to theorize that there's aliens amongst us?
When you say well, 2 things. So I don't want to be evasive. But I also want to be very specific. When we say aliens, and then we also are we saying something from another planet, or are we simply saying non-human?
Non-human intelligence that looks like us? that moves around with us.
So is it possible? Well, we're doing it already with the panda bear. So,
Right.
It's not that we
Seems
do
like
it all
a
the time.
strategy that'd be very simple.
Sure. And especially if you have the technology. Now, as far as...
Panda bear.
Yeah, there you go, right?
Carrying little baby pandas.
Exactly, right?
Boy, those are shitty panda bear outfits, too. They're fucking terrible looking.
They're pretty terrifying, aren't
Like
they, actually?
you put that in front of my dog, he's gonna bark. If like a dude in a dog costume, he'd be like, that ain't a fucking dog.
Yeah, well...
How's a wild panda bear not know that dude's not a panda bear? That's crazy. See,
He's a panda terrorist.
that looks like a fucking alien. Like if it was really dark out and that guy grabbed you and zapped you with a tranquilizer, you'd have an alien story.
But yeah, my point is that we always use camouflage,
Right.
For obvious reasons. We do it in the military,
Sure,
right? I mean, camouflage, camouflage uniform, I stealth aircraft, for camouflage.
Sure, you do it when you go hunting.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
I do. Absolutely. So it's not a stretch of the imagination to suggest anything coming here that doesn't want to provoke us probably wants to blend in. Now,
Of course.
do I have any type of empirical evidence to suggest that they are living among us? I don't. What I can say definitively that whatever it is, it's here. And by the way, you already have very senior people in our government that have said it's here, whatever it is.
Right.
But these things could also be from under the water. These things could be something that is as natural to Earth as the little beasties were, right, when we first discovered them. Maybe they've been here all along.
Right.
So
the ocean is largely undiscovered. One of the things that people need to understand is that most of the exploration of the ocean is really essentially around the outside edges.
that's right.
It's around the shores,
Less than 10%. So
which is nuts.
a buddy of mine
90% of the ocean.
That's right.
Like what?
we know more about the moon than the bottom of our own ocean. And so
That's so crazy.
yeah, that's fact.
And these underwater crafts, like this enormous one that apparently was near this oil rig, how many of them have been? Has there been more than one of those videos?
So let me tell you what I can say from open source.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And then I'll tell you about a conversation I had without attribution because I don't want to get in trouble.